You know, it's become abundantly clear that the Overwatch 2 balance team currently has no vision for the game. That's what I want to discuss today. Hi, everybody. My name is Abby. Welcome to the video. Before I jump into it, here, if you can help a guy out, more than half of you are coming back to watch the video, but not all of you are subbed. Hey, guys, if you're coming back, watching the videos, you're enjoying the content, please hit the subscribe button. It's a free way to support the channel. All right, with the introductions out of the way, let's jump into the video. It's a big claim to make to say something like Overwatch 2's balance team doesn't have a vision, and you know, I do want to talk about this a little bit. Particularly, I feel like I saw the signs of this early on when they decided to approach the way that they were handling the early meta in the game, where their logic just didn't make sense with the way that the balance went about it, because it just felt extremely inconsistent. For example, early on, now, but again, before we jump into all of this, guys, I'm not blaming Alec Dawson. I'm not blaming anybody on the balance team as a one person type thing. This is a team made decision. I'm just trying to bring it to light that there are just some things that don't, you know, line up properly. I'm not trying to flame the devs. I'm not trying to point the gun at somebody and tell the community to shoot. Please do not harass anybody. I feel like I have to put this out there. It is just a criticism of what they say, what they do. That is it. I'm just criticizing in a constructive manner as best as I can. After overreacting last night, I just want to talk about it. That's it. All right, with that being said, so basically early on in Overwatch 2's lifespan, when we had the initial DPS passive that was a little bit too good, you know, Alec Dawson had basically said that the reason they were nerfing Genji down to where he was nerfed down to is because of the initial DPS passive that did exist. Now, when that DPS passive got removed, you know, Genji didn't have any compensation buffs to help him feel better. And obviously, progressively now, about almost 2 years later, he's one of the worst characters in the game. And back then, when an interview was done to talk about Genji and they were discussing about him, you know, Alec had this to say about Genji's power.
Nothing planned at the moment, but I can definitely talk about what we normally discuss when it comes to Genji. Performing better than perception. Definitely, I think Genji's still very popular, still doing quite well. One of the things though that we want to talk about, that we would like to actually address maybe down the line, it's something that we discuss is, where is his power coming from? I think right now a lot of that power is in Dragon Blade. Are there things we can do to retain that fantasy while also diminishing some of the power that happens during the ultimate? And then giving some of that power back into neutral, right? In more of the neutral game, whether it be in the ammo count, whether it be in the damage. So it's something we talk about, but right now, no plans there to change anything with Genji at the moment. But we do hear it a lot. we know Genji is one of the most popular heroes in the game. People want to talk about it, and they definitely don't like when he gets nerfed, for sure.
And basically, as you can see, Alec openly admits that, you know, they are not sure where Genji's power comes from. Is it his shurikens? Is it the blade? And honestly, that doesn't inspire much confidence in somebody who's a fan of the hero, somebody who's reached top 500 with the hero, because you're like, well, this, you know, these are the people, not just one person. He is just representing his team in this moment in time. But, you know, there's a group of people back there that don't necessarily understand what makes this character strong and what makes this character weak. Arguably, the problems with Genji have more to do with his interactions with the way supports enable him more than it does in his own kit. There's a very easy solution for this that has been recommended a bazillion times that were given to his brother when Mercy could damage boost Dragon Strike back in Overwatch 1 Season 10, and that same, you know, solution could be given to Genji, where Genji cannot be affected by damage boosts, and that is just a solution they've never implemented, and yet they sit there and they wonder, like, well, you know, what is Genji's power level? Another thing that just doesn't make sense to me from the perspective of vision is currently, at the moment, they had nerfed certain characters' HP pools down to 225 with the justification that any character that is a mobile character is going to basically be, you know, losing a little bit of HP, and well, some of them will get compensation buffs to help them out. Now, for some strange reason, Genji didn't move to 225 HP, and the simple reason I believe that's the case is they just don't want to buff his damage. So they believe if they make him a little bit more tanky, it'll be fine. And the same thing I feel is the problem with Venture as well. I think Venture is one of the most incredible characters in the way that they move around, and they just didn't nerf Venture either. They still got to maintain their current HP bar, 250, I think, if I'm not mistaken, on top of my head, and they got to maintain that HP bar. And again, the simple reason for that is I personally believe they do not want to nerf Venture, which is a little bit silly, and I'll talk about Genji and Venture's case when I circle back to it. This problem isn't just prevalent in these characters, it is something that can be seen throughout other characters as well. For example, like Reaper completely lost his identity as a tank buster because the team said that they didn't really want tank busters to be so prevalent and strong. And yet they created Mauga, and when Mauga came out, if I'm not mistaken, I don't remember who said it, but I remember watching the interview where one of them said that, well, they're fine with having tank busters in the tank role. But how does that make sense? So it's fine for tanks to have tank busters in their role. So at this point, you could maybe argue that Mauga and Roadhog fall into this category somewhat. But Reaper is where we draw the line. Now, don't get me wrong, Reaper is finally getting better. Reaper actually feels very good right now, and they actually implemented the change that I suggested, which was just tighten the guy spread and he'll be fine. There's no need to do anything else, you know, and they actually did it, which I'm very happy about. Also, I'm a bit surprised that Reaper didn't lose HP either, because I would argue that he's very mobile. He's actually very, very decent right now. Surprisingly, he's definitely much better than Genji, that's for sure. But yeah, so that's like one of the areas that I'm like, well, what is the vision here? Like, why do we pick and choose who gets to be one thing, but the other one doesn't? It took them so long to bring Reaper into a good spot as well. And this like little, this little problem kind of continues because it, like, for example, it took them almost over a year to properly nerf Sojourn to a point where she wasn't oppressive. There's also the case that they were just having a constant identity crisis with what they wanted Symmetra to do or what they wanted Symmetra to be. The same problem is then also seen on a character like Mercy, where they just weren't sure on, well, do we keep the healing strong? Do we make her movement even clunkier so she feels worse to play? And again, the vision here is like, what are we doing here? Like, what is the point of this change? And there is only one thing that I've seen that has remained consistent within these patches, and that is that in my opinion, and this is me trying to make sense of it, I don't know if this is what they are doing, is they are trying to lessen the gap between the skill floor of this game and the skill ceiling of this game. The one thing that I constantly feel is in almost every patch, easy heroes become easier to play, harder heroes become even harder to play. And that is slowly bridging that gap more and more and more, to the point where if you're playing a harder character, you're having a worse time and the game can feel more frustrating. And arguably the easier characters are just a very chill and light-hearted experience where honestly the game just feels so relaxing. Like when I pop over to support and if I'm playing Lifeweaver, Kiri, or Moira, I'm chilling, brother. Like I don't have a problem. But then I jump over to Ana or Zen, or Lucio before this patch, and life feels like hell. And it's just kind of like, these are characters that require a lot more thought process, attention, and proactivity, Ana, Lucio, and Zen, compared to, Kiri, Weaver, and Moira, who can just kind of turn their brain off and do whatever they want. And my question is, why are we doing this? I believe Aaron Keller himself has said that they want Overwatch 2 to be a competitive social shooter game. But Aaron, like in my personal opinion, you and your team have failed on both fronts. Again, I'm not enticing any harassment. This is just in my opinion. A competitive game, what makes a game competitive? When the game rewards you to a skill to reward ratio, and it doesn't try to bridge the gap between a bad player and a good player, especially a bad hero and a good hero in terms of learning curves, skill curves, etc., etc. This is when a game is actually competitive, because the entire point of being a competitive game is that you're competing with one another. And if you are playing, arguably, if you are playing the better heroes that need more time, effort, and skill in order to learn them, you should be allowed to thrive on those heroes. I feel like this is something that isn't necessarily discussed to the extreme that it should be discussed at. For example, around the balance patches, they're trying to figure out the problem as to why Tracer is just a must pick, which they don't realize that Tracer being a must pick doesn't just have to do with the fact that Tracer is strong. It also has to do with the fact that Tracer is the only answer to a lot of the problems they keep making in the game, because other damage characters that can compete with her in her niche, or well, not her niche, but like her strength of what she's able to do in terms of damage and in terms of applying pressure and her ability to exist and do so much, other DPS characters cannot do that. There was a time where Genji was the equivalent for a projectile DPS hero of Tracer. Like he was the Tracer of the projectile DPS role, and now he isn't that, and now he's just a worse Reaper. And Tracer, well, she got to maintain her identity and what she's able to do, but unfortunately at the same time she's one of the only few viable options left in the DPS roster. And just this patch, they're trying to make the dance between Torbjorn and Tracer even more one-sided in the favor of Torbjorn. Like playing Tracer into Torbjorn was a nightmare before, but now it's going to be even worse because they gave him more armor, so it's harder for Tracer to duel him. And number two, if that Torbjorn has 𝐒𝐈𝐈 on his team, you're screwed as Tracer. Like at that point, you're just sitting there as Tracer, like, what is the point? It's not because even 𝐒𝐈𝐈 as a character from her rifle perspective or Torb's rivet gun perspective that you'll be losing the duel. It's from the sheer fact that by pressing one button and creating these auto I play the game for you abilities with Torb's auto lock turret that does so much damage and 𝐒𝐈𝐈's pylon that does so much healing, Tracer is now honestly useless. Like, you're unable to achieve anything unless your team is able to set you up for success. But now the question becomes, how often can you stay on Tracer and your team will set you up for success? Guys, I'm asking a lot of questions because I really want to broaden the perspective and the thinking over here. You know, I'm not trying to flame the devs or anything like that, but I'm really asking, like, what is the vision? Like, why are we trying to make easy heroes, in this case, Torbjorn, much better to play against characters like Tracer? I understand that there's a quote-unquote Tracer problem, but I have a very wild statement to make that I don't think is that wild. Tracer is one of the high skill ceiling characters in this game. Why are we trying to remove that part? Why are we trying to remove that? Why are we looking at characters that genuinely require skill and trying to tone that down? Like, oh yeah, you actually require skill to play, but we're going to tone that down because the average solo queue Andy that's stuck in silver for the past 8 years cannot play against you, so we need to make the game easier for him. And if I'm going to be honest with you guys, this same thing that I'm talking about right now, this is the same reason why Hanzo got shafted in the first place. Is, again, if I ask you genuinely, when was Hanzo meta in Overwatch 2? To the degree that he's received the nerfs that he's received, when was Hanzo ever meta to the point that he has received some of the worst nerfs in the history of this game? Like, I argue that Genji has been nerfed, but at least Genji can sometimes see some play. But Hanzo's case right now is so pathetic, it is unreal. I would actually argue that if there's one character who's the worst DPS right now comparatively to everybody in the DPS roster, it's 100% Hanzo. I feel like, number one, people don't understand that Hanzo is really not that hard to counter. There's a lot of things in the game that can counter him. And number two, his identity has been stripped, and the fact that for 7 years he was a sniper, and then on the 8th year they decided, okay, well, we're not going to make him a sniper anymore. And it's just so bizarre, because it's like, well, what are we trying to do here? And then again, from the vision perspective, it's like, what is the vision for Hanzo? And if I'm not mistaken, they shared that they see him as a little bit more of a brawl hero. Well, if that's the case, and if he's supposed to compete with quote-unquote other brawl DPS, then Mei and Symmetra do his job better. Like, what does he bring that Mei and Symmetra cannot already do better, right? Like, I would actually argue Sim's not that bad right now. She's pretty decent, especially since D.Va is so prevalent. And Mei is Mei is niche, but unfortunately we have to keep Mei niche because she causes like a completely different set of problems when she does become relevant. And again, my question is exactly that, is like, but what is the vision here? Like, why are we constantly, coming back to the bigger question is, why are we trying to lessen that gap between somebody who's a bad player and then somebody who is a good player? And you see this with their balance changes too. For example, a while ago, there was, I was arguing that 𝐒𝐈𝐈 actually needed some buffs. But I said that 𝐒𝐈𝐈 doesn't need a buff in Pylon. Pylon is the frustrating part of the character. Pylon is the I play the game for you ability. We need to buff 𝐒𝐈𝐈's strength in her rifle. And what did they do? They didn't buff 𝐒𝐈𝐈's strength in her rifle. They buffed the strength in the Pylon. And they got carried away. And now when 𝐒𝐈𝐈 got her nerfs, it has nothing to do with Pylon, which is clearly where the strength is. They nerfed the actual part of the kit that takes any amount of skill whatsoever. And that is frustrating because, again, they would rather that the I play for you buttons remain strong than, oh, well, 𝐒𝐈𝐈 is a pretty strong character, but you have to land your shots on her, which they've already made easier with the larger projectile sizes. So why nerf the one part of her kit that actually needs you to play the game actively? And I asked the same question for Juno. Juno was the most well-received support in Overwatch history, or even in any character since the release of Ana Amari back in 2016. And they just decided that, okay, on Juno's release season, they're gonna gutter her. And you know why? Do you know what, sorry, excuse me, that what they gutted about her? They looked at the fact that, you know, first of all, they were saying that depending on who you ask, Juno is either OP or underpowered. First of all, again, I'll reiterate and repeat myself from what I said on my live reaction to the patch. If you thought Juno was OP, please uninstall and go play Fortnite. This game is just not for you. Number two, they decided that they will redistribute Juno's power by putting more strength in her auto-lock rockets in the damage and healing that they do, and reduce the power in the one part of Juno's kit where she actually has to aim and heal the target. So you know what that means? It's more frustrating to play Juno now, because the actual part where you as a player have to have constant uptime will feel worse in terms of doing damage and healing, but the one ability that you can rely on will be the only time that you'll feel any sort of satisfaction that, okay, this did something. But is that really the direction that we want to take the support role, that we just baby them and we just give them these abilities? Like I play a lot of support. Anybody who's been coming down to watch my streams, maybe in the background footage, you'll see me playing some 𝐓𝐈𝐈 at some point, and a lot of things, like you guys have seen that even, you know, I play a lot of support. I play a lot of roles. I play every role actually, and I play a lot of the characters, play most of the cast actually. And you know, I enjoy support when it's more about proactivity. But these changes to, for example, 𝐓𝐈𝐈, Juno, these are just changes that force them to use the reactive playstyle, and nobody enjoys that. Again, the same thing, if you look at what they just did with 𝐓𝐕VER's changes, in case you're out of the loop, they've made 𝐓𝐕VER's petal an elevator that you can use for insane mobility if you know what you're doing. And they also allowed it so that whenever 𝐓𝐕VER is experiencing downtime, whether he's, you know, swapped over to his thorns or whether he's just not doing anything, his healing will now charge up passively. So the easier characters became even easier, and they just gave Moira 225 HP, and then they compensated, buffed her by giving her more damage, buffing her up from 60 to 65 with the argument that, well, you know, her Fade is actually the strong part of her kit. So we're not going to nerf Fade, and you know what we're going to do? We're just going to nerf her HP a little bit, and we're going to just buff up her damage. So it's like, when you look at this trend of what they're doing, it's just such a wrong direction for the game. Like Juno, they got her Juno completely with the argument that they wanted to put strength in her auto aim lock ability, and now no Juno player is having fun. There's actually an argument going on right now that Juno might be even worse than 𝐓𝐕VER with the way she's been released, and that's sad because I actually really loved playing Juno. Anybody like who saw me playing Juno for the trial, I was having so much fun with her, and now, like, you know, I played some games of Juno, and she felt so underwhelming. Like, what was the, I just felt like, what is the point of me playing this character? Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, my entire strength is tied down to one ability that is so, like, tied down to a specific thing happening. And then the same thing goes over to 𝐓𝐈𝐈. Like, I want to play 𝐓𝐈𝐈 in a more poke and, like, you know, like explosive playstyle, but now with the ammo count nerf and the more emphasis on pylon being your strength, you're just forced to either heal bot with her and then build your big sunrise explosion and go in with that. And again, it's just like, why do we keep trying to take away proactivity from this game? And on that same note, they've hilariously buffed tank. I know we've been talking about support for a little bit. I kind of want to circle around to tank's awkward situation as well. Is their arguments for buffing tanks were that, you know, like there's a little bit too much burst damage and yada, yada, yada. And yet what they did with the tank role was that they buffed survivability on tanks. They changed the way armor worked. They gave their abilities in the way that they keep themselves alive. They made them stronger. And then within that same patch, they buffed most of the tanks' damage. And it's just the most counterintuitive thing. It's like, yeah, you know what? Burst damage is a problem. Anyway, so now we're buffing burst damage on tank while we also buff this. And it's like, but then you realistically achieved nothing. You didn't achieve what you were supposed to do. And then on this current patch, they just achieved the fact that they further buffed tank. They buffed Zarya's right click. By the way, Zarya's right click now does Dragon Blade's worth of damage. So Zarya has Dragon Blade on her primary weapon. Okay, her laser beam right click, the grenades she shoots out, does 110 damage now. Okay, you have a tank who's doing 110 damage with her right clicks. You have the situation where they're slowly and, you know, micro buffing Orisa. Like, they buffed, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they slightly buffed Fortify a while ago, but it was so negligible, nobody cared. And then they buffed her spin cooldown of, I think, a season or two ago. And just now they buffed her lethality in the way she can confirm kills with the energy javelin. And Orisa is a very easy to play character. And it's just like we're legitimately 1 or 2 more buffs away from Orisa becoming hard meta. And you know, they nerfed D.Va, but they didn't nerf what needed to be nerfed about D.Va. And then they didn't address Zarya's permanent bubble uptime, and arguably Winston is a little bit oppressive too, but it's just because D.Va and Zarya are standing out a bit more. Winston kind of gets to slide under the rug. But my point is like, what is the vision for the game? Why do we want to call ourselves a competitive social shooter, but then we want to do everything possible to lower the skill ceiling of the game? The skill ceiling of the game entirely has been reduced. These wave spawn systems that they implemented, where you can just, if you die in the span of 6 seconds with your teammate, you will respawn with them. Like, staggering is becoming almost pointless now. Like, there's so many like minor changes that they make to the game that I really sit there and I think, how do you justify that this is a competitive game when almost every patch is making it easier for the casual and making it harder for the people to take the game seriously? And I feel like there's a big disconnect from the casual community and the competitive community. In the casual community believes that the competitive community is whining and yapping simply because they're just burnt out from the game. But I feel like, you know, and I'm going to end it on this note over here, I feel like what the casual community does not understand is the competitive community, which a lot of us are diehard, you know, from Overwatch 1 as well, fans, is we have seen what this game looks like at its peak. We have enjoyed and played this game at its peak when skill mattered and people were interested in learning the game. And now the game has reached a point where rank almost literally doesn't matter, because either rank is being reset half the time, the matchmaker is all over the place, the ranks are all over the place, the meta is horrendous. You have situations where sometimes a hero is so broken that nobody wants to grind out the season, or your average Joe who was stuck in gold is now in Masters because he abused Mauga. Like, how is this supposed to be a competitive game? If you look at any other competitive game, none of these competitive games, in my personal opinion, goes through the problems that Overwatch goes with. Yes, they probably do see minor cases of what Overwatch is going through, but I wouldn't say that it's to the major extreme that Overwatch has fallen into. I mean, guys, again, like, when I say that the balance team is lacking vision, is look at the amount of times they've changed Sombra's virus. If I'm not mistaken, in the past 6 months, Sombra's virus has been changed, I think 3 or 4 times in total, where they just cannot decide where they want virus's damage to be. Like, it just got buffed again, and Sombra is so strong against 225 HP heroes. Like, Mercies and Junos are getting deleted for free by Sombra now, and mark my words, by the mid-season patch, it'll be reverted. And then, like, if you're somebody who's invested in learning Sombra, you're somebody who is a Sombra main, like, you're seeing your character's numbers just kind of going up and down for no reason. You're having to, like, relearn playstyles constantly. You're sitting there like, dude, like, what is the point? Like, why are we always deciding which patch virus is good, which patch virus is bad? Like, why can't we just remain consistent? And that's, like, the problem I have with Overwatch's balanced vision, is it's not consistent. Again, the final thing that I'm going to end it with is, how is Genji not 225 HP when arguably he's a very mobile hero? He has double jump, he has wall climb, he has dash. But his brother Hanzo, who has one small leap that barely moves him anywhere before he gets evaporated by the bare minimum dive from a dive tank, he got 225 HP. And arguably, like, the dev team in the comments, they were like, you know, well, now dueling the other Hanzo will feel better because you guys can one-shot each other. Honestly, I do believe that was the reason why they nerfed him to 225. But then you look at, like, Venture and Genji, it's like, well, why are Venture and Genji not 225? They're pretty damn mobile heroes. Why did they didn't get nerfed? And I'm going to keep it real with you guys. The simple reason why Genji and Venture didn't get nerfed is because Genji and Venture are 2 combo-based DPS heroes that if they got the HP nerfs, they would need damage buffs. And your silver hardstuck Moira mains cannot stand the fact that Venture or Genji can combo them. And that is the simple reason why they've not nerfed the health pools of Venture and Genji. In my personal opinion, I would nerf both Genji and Venture down to 225 and give them compensating buffs. I think it's ridiculous that we pick and choose as to what categorizes as a quote-unquote mobile hero like Hanzo, and then we pretend like Genji and Venture do not fall in that category. This is my problem with the balance team. It's just inconsistent. It's so inconsistent. There's no consistent logic to the changes they make. Look at what they just did with Life Fever. Look at how they're treating, like, the whole, okay, well, who gets 225 and who doesn't get 225. Like, the fact that Baptiste didn't get 225 despite having infinite mobility on his control, that, you know, the jump boost or exit boost and all this type of stuff. The fact that he's still 225 and having 3 health bars still is absurd to me. Right? And that's where I just draw the line. And the fact that armor didn't get a minute, like, at least, like, change the values on how armor works so that Soldier 76 and Genji don't feel pathetic shooting into armored characters. What are we doing here? Also, like, Lucio does more damage than Genji now. Again, what are we doing here? That is my realistic question. Like, what is the vision for this game? I genuinely wish they would sit down, come out, and tell us what the vision for the game is. Because coming over for a podcast interview and saying our game is meant to be a competitive social shooter, when you have killed every aspect of competitive integrity this game had left, and number two, you have killed all the social aspects, because now if you just say the most bare minimum thing of, hey, excuse me, 𝐓𝐈𝐈 player, can you swap to help our ball comp? You're gonna get chat silence, or you're gonna get your account suspended. So now nobody is joining voice, nobody is joining chat, nobody is taking the game seriously, because you have all these like Tom, Dick, and Harry's picking the easy characters and ranking up and then ruining higher elo games. So now the higher elo games players are frustrated and they're going over to quick play and they're tryharding a quick play. So then quick play turns into a sweat fest, and this is the result of what happens when you balance the game for the casuals, and when you balance the game from the perspective that we want to bridge the gap between the ceiling and the floor, when we want to make the easy heroes just as impactful as the harder heroes. This is what happens. I've legit summarized everything, I think, as to why there's so many competitive players in quick play now. Nobody wants to play ranked. I don't want to play ranked. You know why I don't want to play ranked? Because why would I play ranked when all my heroes are shit? My four mains are Genji, Hanzo, 𝐒𝐂, and Pharah. All four of them are now dog shit because Hitscan is winning the game. On tank, I play Reinhardt, Doomfist, and some others, right? And I can flex and play other things too. But all of them feel even worse to play now, because on the Giga Tank patch, which we are still in, if I'm not counter-picking constantly, I'm just not going to have fun. And then the only role left for me to have fun is support. And the problem is all the playstyles that I do like on support, well, none of them exist anymore, because they're just telling the support players to exist, heal bot, and just stay alive. It's like, no, dude, like sometimes I want to Reddit Lucio, sometimes I want to pop up with Zen, sometimes I want to just pop up with the Liari and not care about playing around my pylon. Sometimes I do miss, you know, doing something a little bit more on 𝐒𝐿𝐄 that isn't just, well, let me hide behind my tank. And you know, I was looking forward to having a really proactive playstyle with Juno, but from what I've tested with my tank player and a little bit of like scrimming, is trying to be proactive with Juno is just asking to get blown up and counter-dived, because Juno is a walking free kill for Tracer and Winston. It's insane, some of the decisions they make. The fact that in the dev comment they said that Juno is going to be on the safe side of strong when they made her the safe side of being absolute hot garbage is beyond me. It's just absolutely beyond me how this can be achieved over and over and over again, and they never sit there and they think that, okay, you know what, perhaps we made a mistake. Just for once, it would be nice if they came back and they were consistent with their logic and they balanced the game appropriately and took it from a skill to reward ratio. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk about how to make these heroes healthy, which are considered unhealthy, and what is the best way to balance them. I'm going to be trying to be extremely objective and extremely fair to every character. I'm not going to play any bias whatsoever. I will do my best to explain everything. Now, with that being said, thank you so much for watching this far. If you did, I greatly appreciate it. I will see you guys in the next video.